I still remember the exact second my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, the way my heart stopped before my hand even reached for it, because somewhere deep inside I already knew that one small notification was about to destroy the life I had spent years carefully building. The house was quiet, my husband asleep upstairs, trusting me, loving me, and I was standing there with guilt heavy in my chest, staring at a message that should never have existed. That was the moment I crossed a line I can never uncross, the moment I became the villain of my own story, even though I once believed I was a good woman who would never betray the man who loved her. I wasn't always this person. When I married Daniel, love felt simple and honest. We laughed easily, dreamed loudly, and promised each other forever without understanding how long forever truly is. Life slowly changed us, not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet, unnoticed ways. Responsibilities piled up, conversations grew shorter, and the warmth between us faded into routine. Daniel worked longer hours, I spent more time alone, and somewhere between loneliness and exhaustion, I began to feel invisible. I didn't want another man, I wanted to feel seen again. That's the lie I told myself to sleep at night. Then came Alex. He was a coworker, harmless at first, just someone who listened. He asked how my day was and waited for the answer. He noticed when I was tired, when I forced a smile. Our conversations started with work, then drifted into life, dreams, disappointments. Every message filled a gap I hadn't admitted was there. I knew it was wrong, yet I kept going, convincing myself that emotional closeness wasn't betrayal. But betrayal doesn't announce itself loudly, it whispers, patiently, until you stop resisting. The first time it became physical, I cried afterward. I told myself it was a mistake, a moment of weakness that would never happen again. I promised myself I would end it, focus on my marriage, be better. But guilt doesn't always stop you, sometimes it pushes you deeper, because facing the truth feels unbearable. I lived two lives, smiling beside my husband, laughing at dinner, while carrying a secret that poisoned everything it touched. Every "I love you" felt heavier, every hug a reminder of what I had done. Daniel noticed the distance before he knew the reason. He asked if I was okay, if something was wrong. I lied smoothly, skillfully, and that terrified me more than anything. The woman I had become was someone I barely recognized. Nights were the worst, lying next to him, listening to his breathing, I wondered how long the truth could stay buried before it exploded. Deep down, I knew the truth always finds its way to the surface. It did, on a rainy evening when Daniel came home early and found my phone lighting up with a name that didn't belong to him. There was no dramatic shouting at first, just silence, the kind that crushes your chest. He looked at me with confusion, then realization, then a pain so raw I wished he would scream instead. When he asked me if it was true, my voice broke as I said yes. In that moment, I didn't just confess an affair, I shattered his trust, his sense of safety, his belief in us. Watching the man I loved crumble because of my choices was a punishment no apology could erase. He asked questions I struggled to answer. Why? How long? Was I ever happy with him? Each question felt like a knife, because the truth was complicated and ugly. I loved him, yet I betrayed him. I was unhappy, yet I never tried hard enough to fix what we had. There is no excuse that can make cheating understandable when you see the damage it causes. For days, we existed in the same house like strangers. Daniel barely spoke, and when he did, his voice carried a sadness I had never heard before. I wanted to rewind time, erase every message, every moment, but life doesn't offer that mercy. All I could do was sit with the consequences of my actions and face the woman I had become. That was the end of the life I knew, and the beginning of a painful reckoning I never imagined I would face. Years later, I sometimes think the hardest part wasn't losing my marriage, but realizing how easily I lost myself, and that truth still follows me wherever I go. The night Daniel finally spoke again, his words cut deeper than anger ever could. He told me he didn't recognize me anymore, and that broke something inside my chest that has never fully healed. We decided to separate, not out of hatred, but because trust, once shattered, doesn't magically rebuild itself. I watched him pack his things, each folded shirt a reminder of what I had destroyed. When the door closed behind him, the silence felt louder than any argument we had ever had. Life after betrayal is not dramatic like in movies, it's painfully ordinary. I woke up alone, made coffee for one, and sat with my thoughts. Friends took sides, family asked careful questions, and I carried the weight of judgment, deserved and undeserved. But the harshest judgment came from myself. I replayed every decision, every moment I could have chosen honesty over secrecy. Cheating didn't start with a kiss, it started when I stopped communicating, when I chose comfort over courage. I tried to understand why I did it, not to justify myself, but to prevent becoming that person again. Therapy forced me to face uncomfortable truths about my fear of confrontation, my need for validation, and my inability to express unhappiness in healthy ways. I learned that loneliness inside a marriage doesn't excuse betrayal, it demands conversation, boundaries, and sometimes painful honesty. I learned that love isn't just a feeling, it's a responsibility you protect even when it's difficult. Daniel and I spoke months later, not to reunite, but to find closure. He looked stronger, calmer, and that gave me both relief and regret. I apologized again, not expecting forgiveness, only wanting him to know that I finally understood the depth of my actions. He told me he was learning to trust again, slowly, carefully, and I realized that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means carrying the scars without letting them define you. This story doesn't end with redemption wrapped in perfection. I didn't get my marriage back, and maybe I wasn't meant to. What I gained instead was a painful but necessary awakening. Betrayal taught me the value of honesty, the cost of silence, and the importance of facing problems before they turn into destruction. I live with my mistakes, but I also live with the responsibility to grow beyond them. If you're listening to this and you feel unseen, lonely, or tempted to escape instead of confront, let my story be a warning. Cheating doesn't solve the pain, it multiplies it. It breaks hearts, destroys trust, and leaves wounds that last far longer than the excitement ever did. Choose communication over secrecy, courage over comfort, and honesty over momentary relief. Because once betrayal enters your story, it changes every chapter that follows, and some pages can never be rewritten.